Well, that was fast. I talked about how Concord hasn't been selling particularly well in my last video. In fact, according to analysts who spoke with IGN, Concord sold roughly 25,000 units, 10,000 of those on Steam and 15,000 of those on PlayStation. That's about as abysmal as you can get for a AAA live service launch. I don't think I've ever seen a disaster quite like this from a commercial standpoint for a AAA game of this scale. It got so bad that players eventually started to have a hard time finding matches. Matchmaking just wasn't working because there weren't enough players to support matchmaking. And so across Reddit, we started seeing a number of people complain that certain modes are just straight up impossible to play, and others you have to wait too long to engage with. And so that further drove players away. Even those who were giving this game a chance were having a hard time justifying the patience that they had to have for this title. And so that brings us to today, September 3rd, 2024. If you go to the official PlayStation Twitter page, you will find this ominous tweet, an important update on Concord from Firewalk Studios. And yeah, you can imagine what this is going to be about. So this is what the blog post reads like. This is from game director Ryan Ellis from Firewalk Studios. We're talking 8 years in development, and this was the unfortunate result. So here's what the post reads like. Concord fans, we've been listening closely to your feedback since the launch of Concord on PS5 and PC, and want to thank everyone who has joined the journey aboard the North Star. Your support and the passionate community that has grown around the game has meant the world to us. There wasn't really much of a community, but, you know, there were some players who tried the game out. And again, even those who gave this game a chance and were constructive about both the good and bad qualities were not optimistic that this game would survive for long, and were adamant about expressing all of the areas in which this game was lackluster. However, while many qualities of the experience resonated with players, we also recognize that other aspects of the game in our initial launch didn't land the way we'd intended. Therefore, at this time, we have decided to take the game offline beginning September 6th, 2024, and explore other options, including those that will better reach our players. September 6th, 2024, folks, will be exactly 2 weeks after the August 23rd, 2024 launch of the game. I've never seen a live service, AAA live service, published by such a high-profile publisher die this fast. I'm actually surprised how fast this died. I knew this was going to surely die, but usually, you know, they release, like a season or two of content before they send it off to an early grave. But this, they just sent off to die from the outset. They didn't try a free-to-play model even, though it could very well be that the game's monetization system just wasn't built for a free-to-play model, so they decided to forego that entirely because this game would just be a money sink. Now, whether this game will shut down forever remains to be seen. They do say here that they're exploring options, including those that will better reach our players. So maybe this is a situation where they're shutting the game down to overhaul it and release it again, but that's quite the gamble to take on a game whose optics are just extremely bad right now. And, this is a new IP. Sure, we can look to situations like Final Fantasy XIV, which launched disastrously. They nuked it, and then they revived it, and now it's the most popular MMO of all time, or one of the biggest, if not the biggest MMOs of all time. And maybe that possibility is there in the future if they really work on this game and really overhaul it and really make it something substantially, new feeling. But that is quite the risk to take. At least Final Fantasy XIV had the Final Fantasy name behind it. Concord is just Concord, and it failed to resonate with players. And for it to, explore other options that sees it release in some way, shape, or form later would involve them overhauling this game so much that it's practically unrecognizable. And I'm just not sure that that's an option, a risk, a gamble that Sony and PlayStation would be willing to take, especially with how much money they've lost on the launch of this game. 8 years in development with a budget that, isn't, GTA 6, but it's still nothing to scoff at. This was ultimately still a huge financial loss for Sony. And I cannot imagine them taking a risk with this. Best case scenario, they are going to overhaul the monetization so that Concord can be supported as a free-to-play game. Maybe, but the bones overall are maybe going to be the same. If that's the case, we'll see how that goes. But do keep in mind that the beta for Concord already failed to attract players, and that was free to play. So even going free to play, I don't think there's hope for this game. I personally get the sense that by exploring other options, we're ultimately looking at this game shutting down forever. And there are definitely going to be layoffs at this studio. And worst case scenario, this studio may very well get shut down. I mean, it was acquired by Sony and PlayStation, and you know how publishers are. As for how the situation will be handled in terms of people who have purchased the game or were intending to purchase the game, it reads right here, quote, "While we determine the best path ahead, Concord sales will cease immediately and will begin to offer a full refund for all gamers who have purchased the game for PS5 or PC. If you purchase the game for PlayStation 5 from the PlayStation Store or PlayStation Direct, a refund will be issued back to your original payment method. And then for those who want to refund it on the Steam Store or Epic Games Store, it's the same deal. Refunds will happen automatically. Sony and PlayStation are essentially giving all the money that they've made from Concord, which isn't a whole lot, back to players, no questions asked. So on the Steam Store and Epic Games Store, they will refund players who bought the game over the coming days, and they'll send confirmation emails and contact customers directly, so on and so forth. And then once those refunds are issued, players will no longer have access to the game. And the game will shut down on September 6th. It is an always online game. It is a live service, so there's no point in having the game in your library after that date, as you'll just not be able to play it or access it or boot it up in any way, shape, or form. And already we're seeing that, say, if we go to Steam, the game is no longer available on the store for purchase. And if you go to the PlayStation Store and go to Concord's listing, you'll see that a purchase option is nowhere to be found. The release date here has disappeared, and the label of it simply says announced. Sony have essentially nuked Concord from existence, and after September 6th, it'll be like it never existed. And while we don't know for sure whether it'll stay that way or not, because they are quote-unquote exploring other options, I'd be genuinely shocked if they announced down the line that, hey guys, Concord is coming back, and we've taken your feedback and made a whole new game, basically. It's just, it seems like a highly unlikely prospect. I think them saying we're exploring other options is them just buying time before the inevitable announcement that Concord is as good as dead, or maybe they just won't talk about it ever again. But ultimately, this is all highly unsurprising, especially when you look at the latest Steam charts number surrounding Concord and how the 24-hour peak is sitting at merely 110 players. Right now, only 79 players are checking this game out. Even Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League has more players, not by much, but still higher 24-hour peaks of 144 players, and right now 97 players are checking this game out over Concord 79. And that game has been out for many months now, whereas Concord is still fresh. It's only been out for less than 2 weeks as of the recording of this video. In stark contrast, we have Valve's Deadlock, which recently achieved an all-time peak of 171,490 players. And this is a game that's still in testing mode, as in you have to get invited by Valve or people who are playing the game in order to access it. They've really not marketed this at all. Valve just kind of announced that they're working on this, and already we're seeing these kinds of crazy numbers. So yeah, that's the power of Valve's name. Whereas Concord is a completely new IP. It had an uphill battle with the fact that the live service hero shooter market is so oversaturated, and unfortunately they failed to stand out from the pack. Nothing about the game was utterly abysmal or anything. It was just very average at everything. And that's just not enough in this landscape. And I will once again ask Sony, are you prepared for this push of making tons of live services? The initial number was 12 live service games by 2025. They've since reduced that to 6 of the 12 live service games by March 2026. That's still way too many live service games from one publisher within the span of 2 years. Concord was among those live services. Look how it turned out. Now, some of the ones in the pipeline include like Marathon, which is Bungie's next big project. But even Marathon is getting reports that behind the scenes, things are not going all that great. So Jason Schreier spoke to the Friends Per Second podcast and discussing Marathon. He had this to say: it's not great from what I've heard. There's a reason that it was planned for this year and slipped a whole year, and people that I've talked to are a little pessimistic about it even hitting its current planned deadline, which is sometime in 2025. And Jason Schreier likened the development of Marathon to Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, and that's one game you never want to be compared to, given how hard of a flop that was. He said, Suicide Squad came out and just totally flopped, and I'm worried about Marathon being in a similar situation where it's been in development for a while. It entered development when extraction shooters were super hot. I don't know if that's the case anymore, and now because they've committed so much money and because it was the project that was furthest along as opposed to all their other incubation bets, they're really putting a lot into it, and I'm just not sure there's much of a chance that it'll be successful. But then again, you never know. It also feels like a bit of a Concord situation where it's been in development for 8 years, and 8 years ago, the landscape of live service hero shooters was different. It wasn't quite as saturated. There was maybe more of an opportunity for those types of games, but Concord came in too little too late when that market was way too saturated, and we have all these other hero shooters, all these other live services that are far more feature complete and that just do what Concord tried to do, but better. And now Marathon comes in here trying to tap into the market of extraction shooters, but at this present point, that market is saturated. There are plenty of games that people have made their main extraction shooter experience, and you just have to completely surpass those in every aspect for you to stand out. And so it's a riskier proposition in this day and age when that ship is sort of sailed. And so we'll see how Marathon does. It is Bungie, and so I'm sure there's going to be a loyal community. There's going to be loyal followers who will tune into this game. I think it'll definitely not flop like Concord did, but whether it can live up to, sort of the legacy that Destiny established, and whether it can ultimately make money in the long run, and whether it can be a successful game, that remains to be seen. Jason Schreier doesn't seem super optimistic about things, but like you said, you never know. But yeah, this kind of gambling with live services and making a live service centric future, it just feels like such a dumb idea, and we see it with every new live service flop release. Unless your live service comes from a place of true, genuine, passionate inspiration, if you just pursue live services for the sake of trying to throw darts until you hit a bullseye, that's just a path rife with woes. But then again, you do only have to hit the bullseye once to make billions of dollars in revenue in the long run. And that's what Sony is betting on, that one of these will take off and the other ones will be made up for with this massive success of one live service that just really takes off and stays that way for the long term. So that's what they're gambling on, but I think it's just not a particularly great gamble, not one that comes from a place of genuine artistry. It's just kind of the trend to chase as a corporation is what it feels like. But who knows? Maybe one of these 6 to 12 whatever projects that they're working on will manage to stick the landing. But Concord certainly wasn't it. Marathon, we're hearing iffy things about. And then we have heard of some of their canceled projects like The Last of Us live service game that they decided to scrap so that Naughty Dog could focus on what they do best, which is single player games, which was, I think, the right choice. At least Helldivers 2 was fairly successful, though numbers have kind of petered out, but enough players come back where this is still a healthy live service. Though this was definitely, I think, one of those unexpected live service successes for Sony. And I don't know if it's one that makes the kind of revenue that they want a live service to make, but still, this is one of the ones that you can look at and say this was actually a successful product. But there tend to be more misses than hits. Who knows what other Sony live service projects look like and whether they're worth being excited for. Time will tell. But for now, Concord is kind of the center of discussion because of what an epic flop it was and how quickly it shut down. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the latest on the Concord situation. Possibly the last video I'll make on this game unless they announce the fate of this game down the line, whether it is a complete shutdown and a complete, giving up on this project, or some kind of path forward for this IP. Like, who knows? But that's my take. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on all of this. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.